5 days ago, almost nobody outside of tennis circles knew her name. Today, the entire sport is saying it on repeat. This is the story of how a 21-year-old wildcard from the Philippines walked into the Berlin Open as an afterthought and walked out as one of the most talked-about players on the WTA Tour, and how, even in defeat, she may have just announced herself to the world. Because what happened on that grass court wasn't supposed to happen, not against this level of opposition, not in a single week. And by the time it was over, players who had never paid her any attention were suddenly being asked about her in every press conference. So what actually happened in Berlin? How did a player ranked outside the top 30 take down a Wimbledon semi-finalist, the world #2, and a top 10 veteran, all before the tournament even reached its final 2 days? And why is her semi-final loss already being treated as one of the most significant results of the entire grass season? To understand why this run matters so much, you first have to understand exactly how unlikely it was supposed to be. A wildcard entry in tennis is more often than not a courtesy. It's an invitation extended on potential, not on expectation. The unwritten rule is simple: show up, get some experience on a big stage, maybe win a round if the draw is kind, and then step aside once the real contenders take over. That is the role wildcards are handed almost every single time. And that is exactly the role Alex Eala was expected to play when she arrived in Berlin. Low pressure, minimal hype, the kind of entry that barely gets a mention in the tournament preview. But that lack of attention was about to become her biggest weapon, because nobody prepares deeply for a wildcard. Nobody studies her patterns the night before a match thinking she's the danger in the draw. She walks onto the court as a question mark, and question marks are exactly what elite players hate facing the most. Her opener set the tone immediately, and it could not have been a tougher draw. Donna Vekic, a two-time Wimbledon semi-finalist with real pedigree on grass, stood on the other side of the net. On paper, this wasn't just a tough first round, it was the kind of matchup that was supposed to end a wildcards tournament before it even began. Big match experience against raw nerve, proven grass court instincts against a player still building her resume on the surface. And for a stretch, it played out exactly like that script. But then something shifted. Eala began constructing points with a patience that didn't match the occasion. Clean backhands, serves landing with precision instead of panic. No collapse, no rush, just quiet, composed resistance that slowly bent the match in her direction. When the dust settled, the scoreline read 7-5, 6-4. Eala had won. A Wimbledon semi-finalist was out, and most of the tennis world hadn't even noticed yet. That silence didn't last. Waiting in the very next round was Elena Rybakina, the world #2, a former Wimbledon champion, and a player whose serve alone has ended the hopes of far more experienced opponents than this. If the win over Vekic was a surprise, this was supposed to be the correction. The moment reality reasserted itself and reminded everyone exactly where a wildcard belongs in the pecking order. Instead, Eala produced a 7-5, 6-4 win that silenced any suggestion of luck. This wasn't a fluke. It was composed, fearless tennis against one of the most dangerous servers in the world. And it was in this exact match that the atmosphere in Berlin began to change. The outer courts that had been half empty suddenly started filling in. Phones came out, group chats lit up. People who had never said her name out loud before were typing it into search bars in real time, trying to understand who exactly had just done this. Because at this point, it wasn't a feel-good story anymore. It was something the entire tour needed to start taking seriously.
And the alarming part is that beating Rybakina wasn't even the biggest shock left in the draw. Next up was Alina Svitolina, world #8, a battle-hardened veteran with a career built on ending breakout runs from players exactly like Eala. Svitolina doesn't just test your game, she tests your nerve. And for a stretch, it looked like she might do exactly that, racing out to an early lead and pushing Eala into uncomfortable territory. But the response was the story of the entire week. Pressure didn't break her, it sharpened her. Point by point, she clawed back, eventually closing it out 6-3, 6-4 in an hour and 23 minutes. 3 matches, 3 ranked opponents, 3 wins that had nothing to do with fortune and everything to do with composure that simply isn't supposed to belong to a player in this position at this stage against this level of competition. By the time the semifinal arrived, Alex Eala wasn't a footnote in the draw sheet anymore. She was the headline. She had become the player every broadcaster wanted to talk about, the name every rival was suddenly being asked to prepare for, and the storyline carrying an entire tournament. And waiting for her there was the one opponent capable of disrupting all of it, not purely because of ranking, but because of history: Linda Noskova. Earlier this year at Indian Wells, Noskova hadn't just beaten Eala, she had dismantled her. 6-2, 6-love. The kind of result that lingers, the kind that quietly creeps into your head in tight moments long before a rematch even begins. And Noskova arrived in Berlin clearly carrying that memory with her, determined to reinforce it.
From the very first points, the tone was unmistakable. Noskova came out sharp, aggressive, taking time away on every exchange, refusing to let Eala settle into the calm, controlled rhythm that had carried her through 3 statement wins. She raced through the opening set 6-2, dictating from the baseline and hammering her serve, finishing with 5 aces and total command of her first serve points. For a moment, it looked like the run might simply end there in straight sets, without much resistance. But Eala kept competing. In the second set, down 3-1, she found something. 3 consecutive games, including a crucial break, to surge ahead 4-3 and put real pressure back on Noskova for the first time all match. The crowd rose. For a few minutes, a deciding third set actually felt possible. But Noskova cancered immediately, just like she had all week, winning 3 straight games of her own to close it out 6-2, 6-4 in just over an hour. The run was over, 1 win short of a maiden WTA 500 final. If the story ended there, it would be easy to frame this as simply a good week that fell just short, a feel-good run with a disappointing final chapter. But that framing misses the point entirely, because the value of this week was never really about the scoreline against Noskova. It was about what the previous 3 matches revealed. A wild card given almost zero expectation walked through a Wimbledon semifinalist, the world number 2, and a top 10 veteran, not across a season, but in a single week, on a surface she's still building a resume on. That's not the kind of week that quietly fades from memory. That's the kind of week that changes how an entire tour talks about a player. For a while now, the conversation around Alex Eala has centered on potential, promising talent, a name to watch, someone to keep an eye on eventually. Berlin makes that word eventually much harder to use. You don't beat a former Wimbledon champion and a top 10 veteran in the same week and still get filed away as just a prospect. This wasn't a glimpse of what she might become down the line. It was evidence of what she already is right now. And that distinction matters for everyone left on tour, because the field isn't dealing with an unproven wild card anymore. They're dealing with a player who has already shown she can take down elite opposition on the biggest courts available to her. That's where things get genuinely uncomfortable for her rivals, because players rarely walk away from weeks like this smaller. They walk away bigger. Belief is one of the rarest, most valuable assets in professional sport. You can train technique, refine tactics, build fitness, but you can't manufacture the certainty of knowing, without hesitation, that you've already beaten players at this level, because you've actually done it. That kind of belief doesn't fade quietly. It compounds. It resurfaces in tiebreaks nobody expects you to win, in the way a player walks onto court against a name that used to feel untouchable. So yes, this loss stings. It should. Falling 1 match short of a final after a week like this carries real weight. But every meaningful career has a chapter like this one, not defined by a trophy, but by a revelation. A week where a player stops wondering if she belongs among the elite and instead proves it, directly against the players who define that level. And the timing here is impossible to ignore, because Wimbledon arrives just weeks after this exact run on the very same surface. Before Berlin, opponents saw a wild card they could afford to underestimate. That version of Alex Eala no longer exists. Now they see the player who eliminated a Wimbledon semifinalist,
stunned the world number 2, and pushed past a top 10 veteran, all in the same week. Eala leaves Berlin without the trophy, but she leaves with something far more dangerous heading into the grass slam that matters most. Belief that's no longer theoretical, it's proven, and that should worry every single name left in the draw.